Hey, it's Mazzy. This is Memories of a Vinyl Junkie, 1984. I don't know if you've seen any of the other ones. If you haven't, there's a playlist, Memories of a Vinyl Junkie, somewhat autobiographical showcase of records and pop culture items and personal stories. If you're into it, great. If you're not, there's plenty of other videos to check out. So, while we go on, a little bit in the background, you may hear an album that I really like from that period. I only have it on CD, so this is Jean-Michel Jarre, his Zoo Look. I first got into Jean-Michel Jarre from his album Oxygène in the 70s. I got it as an import, and it was sort of a sensational album around maybe a few years after Tubular Bells. It's nothing like Tubular Bells. I only say that because I remember initially Tubular Bells on Virgin Records came out, and we only could get it as an import until it was distributed here. And then of course it exploded when the theme was used in the early 70s or mid 70s, whenever it was, on the film The Exorcist. But we're in 1984, whole different thing. I'm jumping around with these videos in various years just when I feel the urge. So Jean-Michel Jarre, Zoo Look, fantastic album. What a year. 1984 is a year I turned 30 years old. It was one of the years I was single. Single Maslov, single in San Francisco. Things were changing a lot in the world. I had been out of the music business since 1980, from the record business, and I was sort of floundering work-wise. And I got a job working at an audiovisual company, McCune Sound, McCune Audiovisual, where I ended up working at Moscone Center in the San Francisco Civic Auditorium and a lot of the hotels around San Francisco, working on conventions. So I'd work architect conventions, medical conventions, orthopedic surgeon conventions, College of Surgeons, where I would have to project and do sound reinforcement and video projection and slideshows. So you'd see operations and skin grafts and discussing things like that. But in the middle of the year, or actually, I guess in July, I think it was, we'll find out here in a little bit, I got to work at the 1984 Democratic Convention at Moscone Center. And that was one of the highlights of anything I've ever worked at. And I have a lot of pictures. So in the middle here, there's gonna be a mini, like a 2-minute slideshow mixed in so you don't have to wait to the end. You can speed through it. It's only 2 minutes. And it's some photographs I took on the floor, the convention floor. So those of you of a certain age who are political wonks and media wonks might recognize some of the politicians and media commentary folks of the time, of the period. So, and then snuck in here, not even snuck, you'll see it, I'm gonna play one record that is one of my favorite singles in 1984. I'm gonna just stick it in. I don't have the album, I just have the 45, and I'll stick that in here, and I'll just play a little snippet of that for about 35, 40 seconds or so. And I'm gonna show you my favorite movies, 10 favorite movies of 1984, as we discuss that year. So I'm gonna start out with, to me, the most important band that I got into, which ended up becoming literally one of my favorite bands of the 1980s, and I think are an incredible band, and that is the Smiths. I got a promo copy of this. I wasn't working the record business, but I had friends still at different labels, and a friend of mine who worked for Warner Brothers Records, he had Warner Brothers, Sire, Elektra Records, Asylum, you know, the whole WEA group, gave me a copy of this. And that's the actor, artist, Joe D'Alessandro, who was a Warhol, Andy Warhol, sort of part of the factory in a bunch of Warhol films. He's used on the cover of this album. I had no idea what this is about. But the song that hit me, and I kept turning on friends to it, and it never became a hit in the States at all. It was really kind of an album cut. I don't want to say it's a deep cut because it opens up the album. That's Reel Around the Fountain. I would put this, I recorded this record onto a cassette and played it in the car constantly, and especially that song, I kept rewinding it before. Of course, this was before compact discs. But Hand in Glove is in here. This Charming Man, Pretty Girls Make Graves, You Got Everything. What a great debut, one of the great debut albums. And of course, that same year, since we're here, I'm going to show this. I got this as the copy I got. This only came out initially in the as a UK release, Hatful of Hollow, and the song, of course, on this record. Of course, this was a mix of various singles and sort of leftover tracks that weren't on albums in the UK on Rough Trade Records, Rough 76, Rough number 76. And of course, well, William, It Was Really Nothing. What Difference Does It Make? Hand in Glove, a different version, because a couple of these tracks were BBC live recordings. Same with the version of Reel Round the Fountain here. But the song that really changed is How Soon Is Now. The guitar riff on that, and that's when I fell in love with the guitar playing of Johnny Marr. So I can't even talk about 1984 without talking about this. Now, it was also, we were deep in the whole MTV thing, and that was a big deal, getting cable and watching MTV. I realized when I was pulling things, what I was doing personally and seeing live is totally different than the records I was buying. There was this whole post-punk scene going on, and my buddy Brooks, Jazz Shit Brooks, he's been on some of my videos here, and he was my closest buddy then, and he was one of my few friends that would go out to see new music with me. We went out a lot. There's a whole, in all of the sort of the early to mid 80s, there was in San Francisco a series of events called Club Anonymous, Club Anon. And there were these sort of pop-ups at various venues, illegal venues, where there'd be fashion shows and photo shows and conceptual art and avant-garde music and funk music and punk music and post-punk, all kinds of stuff. And I don't have a lot of records to show for it here. I didn't pull many 45s this time, but still there was the Def Club well, the Def Club had closed by then, which was a club literally in an old Def Club on Valencia in San Francisco. The Mabuhay, I can't remember if that was still around, but there were a lot of venues that were popping up and closing down, a lot of independent things, but I still went to see a lot of music. So, without further ado, I will continue with some other albums that are not really in that mode of what we were seeing. I mean, I remember Brooks and I, we went to these events, and since they were illegal, you'd have to get a secret password. It was kind of like something you'd expect to see during Prohibition and something. Of course, because of fire marshal laws and overcapacity. Looking back on it, I'm glad we got out alive half the time. But it was a really cool thing to see these avant-garde records. Again, one of my favorite artists I've mentioned many times here put out 2 albums, one of which was a live album, but the one album that I really liked here was this one, a studio album, Mr. Heartbreak. And what's great about this is Peter Gabriel's on it and plays on a song called Excellent Birds, which is really a wonderful record. It has that Peter Gabriel thing going on that he was doing with So and his first few albums. But he was really getting really popular just past his time. So had come out, I believe, or Shock the Monkey was the year before, 2 years before. I guess I'm missing my dates right now. But Sharky's Night is on here with the writer. I'm gonna think of his name. William Burroughs. William Burroughs actually is the voice on this, which is pretty cool. So I love this record, Laurie Anderson, 1984. Another album which was just all over, and in fact, you drive down the street and people would have this blasting in their car radios and you could really hear the beat. And it's very commercial, but I still think to this day, it's one of the great debut albums too, is Sade. There was a sticker on early copies that pronounced Sade, S-H-A-R-D-A-Y. Turns out that's not really how she pronounced her name, it's Sade. So what do you know? But Smooth Operator was the big hit. I still love her, and I think she's been really consistent throughout the years. I think there's a box set coming out this year of her work in 2020, overview of her collection. Great artist, just beautiful singer. Another album was one of my favorite bands, and this was on Slash Records from Warner Brothers. This is probably their best album, I think. When Will the Wolves Survive by Los Lobos. I used to see them a lot when they came out to clubs. To me, one of the great East LA bands, one of the great bands, American bands. Not just East LA, obviously, that's where they came out of, but they came out of the whole Slash movement with X and the Blasters and that whole Southern California thing. But they're still together and they're still making amazing music. Of course, here's a series of some of the biggest, hugest albums that came out in 1984. All of a sudden, even though he had been big, popular, this just knocked the socks off of American audience and worldwide audiences with Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. And I like this album a lot. Of course, it was all over MTV with that Courtney Cox video with Dancing with Myself, excuse me, not Dancing in the Dark. I'm thinking of Generation X, Gen X, Billy Idol. But this is not even close to being my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. It's almost like a lot of us who were into Bruce early on just thought, oh my God, did he sell out? He didn't sell out. This is a great record. I just got so tired of hearing this record. And of course, you know, some politicians, you know, really took this the wrong way. It's really kind of an anti-war song. It's not like totally up with America like some politicians thought. But still a fantastic record. I can listen to it now. I couldn't listen to this album for about 20 years because it was just so overdone. There were something like 16 singles off this record. Of course, I do have the 12-inch single of Born in the USA. So, another of probably one of the biggest artists of that year, the whole MTV thing, and I actually love this record. And I don't think I've ever showed a Madonna record on my channel, but Like a Virgin, ooh, like the very first time, ooh. This is a beautiful record. And of course, MTV really pushed it. But in that video with Danny Aiello as her father, I love that. Again, MTV really changed everything. You don't need me to tell you that. That was such a big deal. This is produced by Niles Rodgers, who became sort of one of the great producers du jour throughout the 80s from Le Chic. Is that right? Great Warner Brothers. I mean, probably obviously one of the most biggest selling female artists of all time, if not the biggest selling female artist of all time. Well deserved. She worked her ass off. She still does. But Madonna here. And of course, the other big friggin' huge record of the day is this record, Prince. I don't remember when this came out, and I didn't get this. I don't remember getting it right away, but when I was looking through it, I found my receipt. Tower Records, September 28th, 1984. I bought Prince and the Cars record. I don't have a Cars record here, but there you go. And I paid $5.99 for this record and the Cars. $5.99 piece. I still have my hype sticker. Let's Go Crazy. I think When Doves Fly is my favorite song on this record. What a great record. And of course, the movie just exploded everywhere. And that's not even in my top 10. So I'm going to be back after this little interlude with my top 10 movies.
Here comes Dick, he's wearing a skirt. Here comes Jane, you know she's sporting a chain. Same hair evolution, same old evolution. Tomorrow who's gonna fuss? And they love each other slow androgynous. Closer than you know, love each other slow androgynous.
1984 was a great year for movies. Again, I've said on my channel here, I'm a big cinephile. Some of these are very, very commercial films. I'm missing one here, but I will call it out. and not in any particular order. The one that won the best Oscar for the best film is Amadeus. I think Amadeus is a friggin' amazing movie. It seemed on paper like it wouldn't work. Tom Hulce played Mozart, Amadeus Mozart. F. Murray Abraham played his arch rival. I'm blanking on his name, but Salieri. And Tom Hulce, I think the only thing any of us saw him in before that was Animal House, so who would have thought? And it worked. Milos Forman, the Czech director, directed this film, and it won Best Film. He also won Best Film years earlier, directing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So what a fantastic director. That's one of my favorite films too. So, also 1984, Once Upon a Time in America. It's a great cast of James Woods, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Burt Young, Tuesday Wells, Treat Williams, James Woods. Sergio Leone does the score, and of course it's directed by Sergio Leone. And did Morricone, I believe, do the score on this? I think Morricone did the score, would be my guess. The near misses on the score. There's a bit when this goes through different decades, and all of a sudden they show up there into the 60s, and you hear this like, yesterday. Not the Beatle version, but it's a little version which seems a little hokey to me, but this is an amazing film. Of course, Sergio Leone did Once Upon a Time in the West, and the spaghetti western, the trilogies with Clint Eastwood, but an amazing, amazing motion picture. Of course, they can't go through mention 1984. The whole Terminator thing started. James Cameron, and all of a sudden, Arnold Schwarzenegger was this huge action star because of this. Now, technically, a lot of people like the second one better, but this started it all with Ayo Sadakana. You know the movie, I don't say any more about it. I think the best cult film, one of the best cult films of 1984, is The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. This is a really fun movie with Peter Weller, who would go on to be the original RoboCop as well. Jeff Goldblum is in here, John Lithgow's in here. It's an hysterical film with these aliens that look like Rastafarians. It's so out there bizarre. This is a repeated viewing film. Of course, Ghostbusters, need I say more? It's just a great film, and it's still a fun film. After that, it's 2, 3, female version, and this is the one. A film I really like, Barry Levinson to me is a great director. One of my favorite films is Diner, directed by Barry Levinson. And he did all these also wonderful films about Baltimore, but I think one of the great surrealist, existentialist sports films. And I'm not a huge sports film person by any stretch of imagination. I think my two favorite sports films might be Slapshot and this, The Natural, with Robert Redford. This is a magically dark film, and I think it's, if you haven't seen it before, Kim Basinger is in it, and the score is by Randy Newman. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. I recommend you check this out, The Natural. Very inspiring too. Paris, Texas, great film by the German director Wim Wenders, amazing score by Ry Cooder, Nastassja Kinski, and Harry Dean Stanton and Dean Stockwell. It's a road picture. It's a slow-moving picture. It's a beautiful picture. Wim Wenders really captures sort of the America really interesting. My favorite film of Wim Wenders is Wings of Desire, and also the film he made, American Friend, based on the Patricia Highsmith book with Bruno Ganz and Dennis Hopper. Of course, Woody Allen. I got to put a Woody Allen film in, but Broadway Danny Rose. What a great film. Incredible film. About sort of a two-bit theatrical manager. And it starts out with these real old comedians who were big in the 50s and 60s, sitting around the table at the Carnegie Deli in New York, telling stories. And of course, they talk about Broadway Danny Rose and it tells the whole story. Wonderful film. Mia Farrow is in it, and a newcomer at the time who was sort of a lounge act who Woody Allen brilliantly used in this, Nick Forte, who had his moment after this for a while. Fantastic film. And then, of course, the debut by the Coen brothers, Blood Simple. What an intense film. I saw this in the theater, and it's really an intense, emotional and violent thriller, but really good, really kind of very noirish. So anyway, Coen brothers. Lastly, the film I am missing here, I can't find my copy, of course. How could you not talk about music, motion pictures, 1984 without mentioning This Is Spinal Tap? Need I say more?
Sun's going down like a big bald head, disappearing behind the boulevard. It's Sharky's night. Yeah, it's Sharky's night tonight. And the manager says, Sharky, he's not at his desk right now. Should I take a message?
So I'm working at this company, McCune Sound and McCune Audiovisual, and doing these conventions, and sometimes I'd go on the road a little bit and do the sound reinforcement or video projection, or just even like friggin' slideshows for doctors. And when I heard they put me in-house for a while at Moscone Center, the big convention center that was actually fairly new at the time. I think it was just built a couple years before that in San Francisco and south of Market. And the 1984 Democratic Convention was there. The nominee for the Democrats was Walter Mondale, who had been vice president under Carter. And it was the first time a major party in America had a woman on the ticket, Geraldine Ferraro. So it was really special for me being there, because I was working in-house. I was able to be there 2 weeks before as they did the build-in, the build-out of the convention center, converting it to this big, giant television studio and convention center. You've seen what conventions are like, except for this year, obviously. It was, to me, amazing, because I get to see all these amazing politicians literally up front and personal. Teddy Kennedy, Walter Mondale, Geraldine Ferraro, a lot of the senators, Dianne Feinstein at the time, a lot of who was mayor of San Francisco then, a lot of the senators, politicians, actors. I took a lot of pictures, and right after this little segment, I'm going to show a little 2-minute slideshow of a bunch of photographs I took on the floor during, before, during, and after the convention. Because I just think it's interesting. Again, you might not be political wonks, but I think it's really interesting. I still have here my VIP card that I had to wear during that week. I think they traded it out every few days. I was allowed in the VIP suite. I had an almost all-access pass. The 1984 Democratic National Convention honored guest. But I was able to kind of really go around. You know, there was Connie Chung, there was Chris Wallace, who's now on Fox News, a young Chris Wallace you'll see a picture of here. There was Bella Abzug, the great New York politician. Just an amazing, amazing, David Hartman, I think, who co-hosted Good Morning America at the time. It was also was an actor for a while. It was really fun. And again, the parties every night. There was these parties at North Beach where all the political wonks and polls and news people would hang out at Tosca's in North Beach, one of the great San Francisco bars right across from Lawrence Ferlinghetti's City Lights bookstore. It was one of the most beautiful summers in San Francisco. Not the cliche where San Francisco gets all the fog in summer, like the famous, you know, the coldest winter I spent was the summer in San Francisco. Wasn't like that. They had just rebuilt. It took 2 years or so, maybe 3, ripping up all the cable car tracks and refurbishing the cable cars. So the cable cars had a whole new cable car barn. The tracks were new. The cables running underground were new. They refurbished all the, you know, the old vintage cars. And literally a week before the Democratic Convention, maybe 2 weeks before, it opened up. And we had blue skies, beautiful weather. And it was just one of those magical, about an overall beginning and the week of 2-week period. Really great. I got an extra pass, got my friend Brooks, Jashid Brooks came in a little bit. Because Brooks and I were like hanging out all the time. So after the event was over, when I got out, like sometimes 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we'd go out to Tosca's or the different bars, and everyone would just be drinking around San Francisco. I think also the hookers were really busy. Not from me, but from the all the political wonks and reporters coming to town. So here's a bit of that slideshow, and we'll be back with more music after this.
America is waiting for a message of some sort or another.
Again, taking it again. I mean, yeah, what are you gonna do?
America is waiting for a message of some sort or another.
So, David Bowie. Okay, this is a problematic album. I was buying David Bowie at this point sort of by habit. This is not a great record, although I've grown to love it over the years. This is when he was on EMI America, and this is called Tonight. However, I think I like the opening track, Loving the Alien, is great, but I love the video and the song Blue Jean. If you ever, check out Blue Jean. It's a great song in my opinion. I think it's his best song around this period of time. Who produced this one? Produced by David Bowie, Derek Brandel, and Hugh Padgham. Hugh Padgham obviously was another one of the producers du jour. Did some kind of artsy stuff. Did an album with Paul McCartney. But Tonight, not a great record. He had a bit of a lull. during this period, but still liked it. Another record which I love was the Bangles. This is the Bangles all over the place, and of course I loved it because it's one of the songs I loved so much was Going Down to Liverpool. You know, very Beatlesque pop jingle jangle song, which is pretty amazing. Produced by Dave Kahn. The Beatle connection is he would go on to work with Paul McCartney years later, and he's the one that pulled together the band for Paul McCartney, who has been Paul's longest running band now. What else is on here? Hero Takes a Fall, that was a big hit as well. Again, this stuff was all over MTV, of course. The Bangles, you know, along with the Go-Go's. I always hate to put them both together, but LA female bands from the 80s, they kind of get lumped together, unfortunately. Now, I was a big fan of getting into Echo and the Bunnymen. I think this is probably my favorite Echo and the Bunnymen. I think it's their most mature, even though I like all their records. One of the great, you know, great Liverpool bands too. But the song on here is The Killing Moon. And I have the 12-inch of that song, The Killing Moon, which is a long extended version, which is just gorgeous. I think that is a perfect song. Of course, on here is Ocean Rain, Seven Seas was big, My Kingdom. Anyway, love this record. Now, I went to see him in the Berkeley Community Theater in 1984. As I said, I went to a lot of music, a lot of the, you know, indie shows at the punk and new wave or post-punk clubs by that point. And again, a lot of venues would pop up and disappear for a while. But when I went to see them at the Berkeley Community Theater, some guy, the opening act I'd never heard of, this guy comes out with an electric guitar, standing alone, skinny guy, and the audience was going crazy waiting for Echo, and really loud. This guy comes out with an electric guitar and was Billy Bragg. After the first song, he just went, he was like going all punky, like folk singer doing punk, really loud electric guitar. Great songwriting. It's really thick British accent, and I fell in love with Billy Bragg. I went to see him literally every time after this. I think I saw him at the, there's a club on Haight Street, which was upstairs on Haight Street, called the I-Beam. It was had been, or still was, like a gay disco. And then 2 nights a week they started doing new wave, post-new wave clubs. I remember seeing the first tours of Echo there as well. I saw The Cure there, I saw Billy Bragg there, I saw the Violent Femmes there. It was a great time for music. So this is one of my favorite double bills. You wouldn't really think of it, but as a really, you know, it worked. I mean, they worked really well together. I'm gonna throw this out there because there's like a love-hate relationship a lot of people have right now with U2, and I'm in the same boat. I went to see U2 on their very first tour when their first album came out with Boy at a club called the Old Waldorf that holds a couple hundred people, and they were friggin' great. I loved it. And I kept following along with U2, and then they all of a sudden got mature with this huge record. And this is produced and engineered by Eno and Daniel Lanois, and that became a really amazing team. Whatever you want to say, whatever you think about Bono and Edge, and you know, like those friggin' glasses, and Bono, you know, next to Dave Grohl. I think Bono's in every friggin' documentary talking about whatever the music is. It could be Bavarian Beaver bagpipe music, and Bono would be on screen, or David Grohl talking about it. But what a great record. Pride, In the Name of Love, The Unforgettable Fire, MLK, fantastic record. I haven't listened to this in a long time, but I think it is one of the classic records, and of course one of the best records of 1984. So, my buddy Brooks decides, after the convention, after the Democratic convention, we were hanging out, and I think it was probably in late August, early September, he decided to move to New York City. New York City? So, we drove cross country. He took his car. He had a car in New York City for like 2 years where he'd have to move it alternate parking. If you know Manhattan, you don't have a friggin' car. You don't need a car in Manhattan. But he had his, what was it? It was a Toyota, not a Corolla, but a kind of a cool little reddish, orange-red car. So we drove across country. We left, I'd say, early September. It took 2 weeks off. We drove across in about 5-6 days. We took our time. We wanted to take our time and drive around. So we leave. Brooks was moving to New York, and I was going to stay a week in New York and then fly back. He had an apartment set up, as I recall. I forgot exactly all the details, but we leave from San Francisco, and the first night we stay in Elko, Nevada, little town, kind of north Nevada. And of course, we go in this kind of second-rate gambling casino, and I end up playing blackjack and losing $20. $20 doesn't seem like a lot now. It is a lot, but this is 1984. 20 bucks was like 3, 6, and 5. It's like 3 or 4 records worth. So 3 or 4. I lost $20. So I remember the next morning we're driving out, and I got this $20 bill. I said, "Shit, I might as well just throw $20 out the window." So we drove up north, went through Wyoming. We went, I don't remember all the details, but then we ended up going down through Tennessee and Memphis. And we had a deal where we each brought a bunch of cassettes, 90-minute cassettes. And we'd each choose to play one 45-minute side. And there was some great music. One of the songs that I remember on the cassette, and it got to be sort of our running theme song, was from this fantastic REM album. And it was Don't Go Back to Rockville. That's the name of the song. You know, this is 1984, and I have a good memory. But, of course, this is a great record. South Central Rain, Pretty Persuasion, Seven Chinese Brothers. Yeah, Don't Go Back to Rockville, and Little America. Don't go back to Rockville. That seemed to be one of our driving theme songs, because when you're 30 years old, actually, yeah, when you're 30 years old and you're with your buddy, you do a road trip. You do it in your 20s, that's probably the time, but we hadn't taken a long road trip together, and Brooks, right, that year, that period of time, was the closest friend I was hanging out with. And we had such a wonderful trip. I remember we were in, was it Tennessee? And we were walking, I think it was it in Nashville? I think we were in Nashville, or was that Memphis? I don't remember now, which city. But we saw this building, and there was 3 or 4 people standing around, this big tall guy there. And it was Waylon Jennings standing in the doorway. And I went over to it, and Brooks didn't want to come closer. So he took a picture of me, and I think, I'm trying to still find the picture. Brooks has a copy. I remember seeing it for years. So I'm like this big in the frame with Waylon Jennings next to me. So there's a picture somewhere of Waylon Jennings. You know, we went to Sun Studios. We had a great time. We went through Norman, Oklahoma. Went through Utah. I'm going backwards in that whole thing. Anyway, we ended up, after everything, we ended up in New York City. Another song I remember on it was from this album. I really love this record. This is a Lou Reed record. I never see anybody talk about this record. New Beginnings. It opens up this great I Love You, Suzanne, Endlessly Jealous, My Red Joystick, kind of about video games. Maybe My Red Joystick is about something else. Doing the Things That We Want to. This is a really good record, and this was produced by Lou Reed and John Jansen, who I don't know, but I would say if you see this record, pick it up, because it's got a great sound. It's modern without having that bullshit 80s sound with that kind of tinkling keyboard. You see, there's a lot of 80s bands I'm not showing here. I don't have any Duran Duran. There's so many 80s records that you're gonna say, Maslow, you don't have the biggest friggin', I don't have any Wang Chung. Everybody is Wang Chung tonight. I don't have any Wang Chung. I don't even like Wang Chung. You know, there is one album I don't have anymore that I think is a real important album from 1984, and that is Pleasure Dome. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, their version of Born to Run, and Relax, Don't Do It, do-do-do. I'd like to get a copy of that, because that was a really huge record. And that song, Relax, just blew things away. And even their version of Born to Run, which seems kind of a strange record for them to do. But important record. I think it's, I don't know if it's going to hold up still. Maybe some of you can let me know if you've played Welcome to the Pleasure Dome by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Don't have that here. But I still like the Pretenders. And this record is fantastic. Another record that was all over MTV, especially with Middle of the Road and Back on the Chain Gang. Thin Line Between Love and Hate, 2,000 Miles, which is one of the great Christmas songs, produced by Chris Thomas, of course. Middle of the Road and Back on the Chain Gang, to me, are two of the greatest singles of the 80s, definitely. So, the birthday party. 1984, the thing about 1984 is we all kind of were apprehensive about the year coming. And we all know George Orwell's book, 1984. I mean, pretty ominous, right? 1984, Ronald Reagan was still president. You know, Ronald Reagan just had this image, positive image, and I could totally see why people ate it up. He had the positive side of America. He was, you know, decent actor, good actor as a politician. And he did some, you know, maybe some good things for America. Of course, I disagree with a lot of stuff. That was a time that really began the whole thing with the tragedy in America of homelessness. There were a lot of funding cuts because, you know, trickle-down economics, funding cuts to people in need, especially people of diminished capacity, mental problems. A lot of this is that whole healthcare thing, which America would, you know, we still haven't fixed and resolved because they don't want to invest in humans and healthcare in this country like some of the other countries. We're one of the few countries that doesn't really support some kind of healthcare for all. But a lot of people were thrown out on the streets. And a lot of them, remember, this is times after, you know, 10 years after the Vietnam War ended. And a lot of people really needed help. And cutting these budgets, cutting the funding was part of the Reagan administration and the parties at that time. But up with America, the whole positive side, there was Iran-gate, you know, where money for arms and all that stuff. So it was really great working on that. I did not work for the Mondale campaign. I had my jobs, I was working, and I was single, and I was dating, and this was just before, you know, this is, I'm trying to think, is it a year before? Oh no, this is around the time. This is just when AIDS was really starting to happen. But, you know, I had my promiscuous days, pre-AIDS time, and when AIDS hit, being in San Francisco, knowing that, you know, we were all a little scared, even, you know, even the heterosexuals. It was a different thing, and you really had to, you know, it's not unlike on a different scale, the pandemic we're going through now, and HIV and AIDS, and nobody knew what that was, but you started hearing about, you know, the gay cancer in San Francisco and throughout the world. But my 30th birthday was August 23rd, 1984. My friends gave me a party. We went out to Cafe Sport, which is this old Italian restaurant where they bring these huge platters of pesto pastas and red sauce pastas and scampi and, you know, just amazing, huge. You had to order it and they'd be really rude to you and it'd be this long table. There's gonna be a little video, some pictures of that night, my 30th birthday. And I wore a white tuxedo. I think I was going through my James Bond wannabe or something, but I was 30 years old, single. Some of my women friends that were my platonic William friends who I really cared for to love and were beautiful. And I felt like this was like the Brat Pack or something because these beautiful women I really liked and I wasn't dating any of them at the time. That's a whole other story. But we had a great time. So they bring us these plates of food. There was about, I don't know, a dozen of us, maybe 15 or so at this table. And this is August, so this is just before we left, Brooks and I left to go to New York City on that trip that I just told you about. But it was just really a special night. And I remember to this day, my friend Danny, who was in a band I was in, directed this video. He was a video director and editor, and he did like a roast. He did a secret video for me, which we showed at his studio loft after dinner, and it was really just touching. I gotta find, there's a 3/4-inch U-matic version of that video I have somewhere. I cannot find it, but I'm dying to find it, because, you know, this is like 36 years ago, Jesus Christ. A few more records and we'll wind it down. Not one of Nick Lowe's great records, but I was buying all Nick Lowe's records, and I love him. Nick Lowe and his cowboy outfit, and this is when he was on Columbia Records, of course. There's some good stuff on here. Again, you know, Paul Carrick is on here, Billy Bremer again. So a lot of people, Martin Belmont, that was performing with Nick Lowe around this time too. So, you know, I keep this out of habit. I got to put it on a little bit. I think it had some of the 80s problems. Now, another record that, I don't even love this album that much, but to me, it's one of the great singles also of 1984, and that's Don Henley. You know, whatever you say about the Eagles or not, the video of this in 1984, when he's playing those drums with the rear projection, and the song, The Boys of Summer. Boys of Summer is a fantastic single. I don't care if you don't love the friggin' Eagles, if you don't love Don Henley. Great record. This was a huge record. Sunset Grill, okay. What was the other big song? All She Wants to Do Is Dance was a big hit. Yeah, it's okay, you know. But to me, The Boys of Summer is a really good single. You know, it has certain 80s things that maybe aren't perfect now, but what a great record. Now I'm gonna end up with Beatles shit, because this wouldn't be complete without Maslov. The Good, Bad, and the Ugly of 1984 with the Beatles. One of the worst movies ever made in the history of the planet is Paul McCartney's Give My Regards to Broad Street. Terrible film. Oh, talk about what a stupid concept. It's terrible. George Martin produced this record, which is interesting. The movie was directed by Peter Webb. I wonder if he's still alive. If he is, I don't think he wishes he was. Ringo's in this. Brian Brown, the Australian, is in this. Tracy Ullman, Ralph Richardson, a great classic actor. Now, Paul McCartney redoes a lot of songs on here. So he redoes Good Day Sunshine. There's some instrumental stuff, George Martin, like Yesterday, Ballroom Dancing, Silly Love Songs. No More, okay. For No One, Eleanor Rigby, Eleanor's Dream, which has this whole kind of score. I mean, there are some interesting things about this album, and the whole, it does not work. The best thing about this album is No More Lonely Nights, the play-out version. That's a great song, I think. And it's probably the only great original song on this record. Might even be the only original song on this record. He does a couple of remakes of songs from Tug of War on here. But the great thing about the end of the No More Lonely Nights is the lead guitar solo by David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. I friggin' love that. So, Problematic, terrible movie. Maslow says skip it. But this came out. Now, not a great record. This is the first record that Yoko put out after John's death. So John had died in December 1980. This is 1984. It has, it's pretty much all the unfinished songs. They weren't quite finished. They're not fully realized, although the song Nobody Told Me was all over MTV as well. I think it's more of a nostalgia thing. It's kind of an interesting song. Some people wish the Beatles could have gone on it and fixed it like they did, you know, years later in Mythology with Real Love. There is a version of Grow Old With Me on here, which is just a beautiful, it's just a cassette version. I can't remember now. Again, this record has sentimental value, emotional record. We really were dying to hear what was in the vaults, what was coming out. You know, I think Yoko has been a good curator of John Lennon's legacy for the most part, but this kind of ended the whole, you know, the real stuff. You know, there's been things lately, anthologies, box sets, other music, and, you know, from tapes and outtakes and things. But this was, in a way, you know, was going to be sort of the answer to Double Fantasy. Not quite there, but very sentimental choice. So, 1984, I turned 30 years old. I come back from New York, spent a week in New York with Brooks when he moved there, came back. Still was working at McCune, kind of floundering, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I didn't really like my job. It wasn't creative enough for me. And the following year, I'd meet Michelle. And that meeting would change my life in so many ways. Again, I'm not going in order on these videos. You know, hope you enjoy them. Write your comments. And not for everybody, but this is the music from 1984, the films from 1984, and the shit I dealt with in 1984. And it was a good year for the most part. Mondale lost, and Ronald Reagan got reelected. Mazzy loves you.